Thank you. Well, I think I will speak more about political theology, Orthodox political theology, and probably in the end I will say a few things about this individualism and communitarianism debate. So I'm really curious. I'm not a theologian, but I'm really curious about Orthodox political theology because, okay, sociologically speaking, the relevance of theology is increasing, and it is one of the consequences of desecularization, the increasing social significance of religion and the increasing social significance of theology and of political theology. But for me, the question is what kind of political theology we have and what kind of political we need. And when I look at what happens in my country, in Russia, when I look at the kind of political theology which is developing for last, 30 years, we can get a very particular image of this typical post-Soviet Orthodox political theology, which has several typical elements. The first element is a very strong anti-liberalism, very strong anti-Westernism, and even very strong anti-humanism. I mean, this constant emphasis on the fact that there are things which are much more important than human life, than human freedom, and so on. And another important element of this typical Orthodox political theology is this idea of a very unique civilizational identity, which for whatever reasons make the bearers of this identity more moral, more traditional, more virtuous than bearers of other identities, other civilizations. And I would say that in recent years, we see somehow the triumph, the culmination of this kind of Orthodox political theology, which basically manifests itself in domestic policy, for example, in very clear authoritarian turn in domestic policy, which is to a certain extent legitimized by this kind of Orthodox political theology. And in foreign policy, we see this confrontation between Russia and the world, and which the most dramatic aspect is the Ukrainian conflict, which is a political, military, but also now a religious one. And to a certain extent, the culmination of this political theology is so-called theology of war or theology of violence, where we see theological justifications of basically violence against enemies, external and internal, and legitimation of war. And I think that this is also a kind of a dead end of this kind of political theology, and basically a point where we should ask the question where to go from here. And for me, basically, the biggest question is why this kind of political theology is basically the only one which is being developed in Russian context for last, 30 years. Is it because there's something wrong with Russia, or is it because something wrong with Orthodox tradition itself, that it produces this kind of political theology? And probably it is better not to have Orthodox political theology at all, because it's like a Soviet factory which produced tanks, and people tried to reform it in any way, but in the end they still got the same tank. So for me, really, this is the question. I mean, of course, theoretically, we can imagine all kind of Orthodox political theologies, but why we still have this particular political theology dominating, and nothing else? At least, I mean, in my context. Well, okay, part of the answer was given yesterday during the debate on the panel on political theology, where Professor Kalaitsidis basically said, I don't know if I understood him correctly, this distinction between Russian religious philosophy and Russian Orthodox theology, why Bulgakov is a religious philosopher, and I don't know, Florovsky is a theologian. And he said that, well, if you go politically to the left, you become a religious philosopher, and if you go politically to the right, you become a theologian. So this, by definition, so here by definition, it is not possible to develop Orthodox political theology in the more liberal socialist direction, because you immediately become a philosopher, and theologians can say you are a philosopher. No need to analyze your ideas. So, okay, probably I'm too provocative in what I say, but I mean, this is what really interests me. And I would like to say also a few words about this individualism and communitarism. Somehow I don't understand what is here theological and what is here Christian in this debate between individual and collective. For example, when we take Russian Orthodox criticism of individualism, I mean, it's a typical communitarian criticism which can be encountered in secular political philosophy. So where could be the unique contribution of... Okay, but where could be the authentic theological Christian contribution in this debate? And I think that this contribution could come from, I don't know, the attempt to overcome this this distinction in the dimension of, I know, kind of a universalism, of overcoming all this. I mean, we have millions of identities, ethnic, national, I don't know, and like overcoming them. Okay, so something like this. Okay, I'll stop here. So, okay, thank you.